is a contract needing approval that the board will vote on at the regular meeting regarding speech and language services. I'll let Justin go into some detail, but I wanted you to know up front that we went to 3 different companies. I think one was local, but one would not, wanted at least 20 hours, a minimum hourly per week, and we decided against that in our recommendation. Justin go into a little bit greater detail. But Justin, with that said, can you please talk about this contract and how this will help us meet our FAPE requirements and legal obligations?
Yeah, so as you guys know, we started out the school year, and we had 4 SLPs, speech and language pathologists. And right now, 1 is on maternity leave, and then the other maternity leave is on the agenda tonight. And with that in mind, we sought out 3 different companies that provide teleservices. And the one that's on the board meeting for tonight is from .com Therapy. And there's a couple local people that actually work for them. One that Tamara and I talked about, and she actually referred me to her. And nothing but great things to say about the company. And so the issue with the other 2 companies is one of the companies, the one that's local, they could not provide us with any services unless we were at 20 hours or more. And right now, we're not at a point where we need 20 hours, and I don't think we have that at the moment. So the other company that we reached out to was Ardor Health, and Ardor Health had some availability. The problem with them was they didn't have any SLPs that were certified in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, the governor has given some flexibility as far as SLPs are concerned, and they're now allowing SLPs from out of state to do some teletherapy services within the state of Pennsylvania. However, they're still under the requirements that Pennsylvania teachers are under, so they would have to get all of their clearances all over again. And the biggest issue there is, to get those fingerprints and to have anybody started from out of state to come in, it's going to be several weeks. And so the one that we have on the board agenda for tonight is from .com. They said that they would be up and able to run during the week of April 20th. So that would be my suggestion. As far as the cost, they're all fairly similar in cost. .com Therapy is right around the same level as ASA or Ardor Health. So the cost really, it's really, you're comparing apples to apples there. So the idea is for us to be able to get started as quickly as we possibly can. That way we can prevent, any making up of services down the road. I think, with this in mind, having, a couple, about a week and a half of school where students were just getting consultative services, I think we can quickly make up the services. This contract would extend till June 30th. So whatever services that we've missed with kids, we would be able to make up before the end of June 30th. And then they'd also be available for us in case we would want to do any extended school year type speech and language support services for them. So that's on the agenda for tonight. Thanks, Mike.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So being that a lot of our students are served 27 times a year or something like that, are we going to provide that minimum? I think does it say a minimum of that, or is that the maximum?
It just most of them just specify the exact number. So okay. If it's 27 times per year, we'll just make sure that we get 27 times before June 30th.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
So, Ms. Lowry, if you and the rest of the committee are okay with it, we'll go. We have the recommendation on the regular agenda for this evening. Mr. Zohorchek presented the 3 companies he reached out to, and we feel this one is the one that meets our needs the best. So if there's no other questions, I'll move on to number 2. Okay. Number two, we'd like to spend some time talking to the committee about, because later on tonight, we'll ask you to suspend a variety of admin regulations. We reviewed our policies, our graduation policy that does not need to be suspended this time due to the pandemic, but there are some admin regulations as they relate to Keystone graduation and related items in that area that we're going to give Wade and Mr. Heinrich a couple of minutes to present their case on. But in reviewing it, our goal at this point is to provide as much latitude to our senior class as possible. And I fully support the recommendations that we have listed this evening for being suspended for the rest of the remainder of the school year. And before I turn over to Wade, the documents are hyperlinked for your review as well. The first item that says review discussion on suspended policy is an internal document, and the second one is the guidance from PDE. So you see that we're not working in isolation. We're basing this off the guidance of PDE, and the changes we're recommending aligned accordingly with that. Mr. McElhaney, Mr. Heinrich.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovich. Mr. Heinrich, you want to go first?
No, sir. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Vukovich, thank you for the opportunity this evening to speak about these guidelines and recommendations for changes. I appreciate the committee allowing me to come here and be able to talk about some of those. As Mr. Vukovich said, we received our guidance for the high school graduation class of 2020. And what we have done upon Mr. Vukovich's encouragement, as well as PDE's recommendation, to go through our policies, guidelines, our student handbook, any information that would help us with our graduation requirements, and to take a look at those in light of the school closure and what can be done. Went through the student handbook, administrative guidelines, and board policies. We're able to focus on areas of grading, final examinations, graduation requirements, class rank, and commencement. Within the document that is hyperlinked right now, that internal document details what those changes or what the language currently is, and what are those proposed changes and recommendations. Asking only for those changes to be in effect for this school year, and we would return to existing language for next school year.
Is that anybody have any questions about Mr. McElhaney's comments?
I do not.
Okay. It's on the agenda for this evening for you guys to vote on, so I feel comfortable moving forward there. Number three is just an information item.
Mike, this is Wheeler. So I am curious as to how you are going to handle the students' grade, the seniors' grades, and particularly those that are graduating, and class rank, and some of those details. Without getting too far down in the weeds, can you give us, a 30-second rundown of what your thoughts are on some of that?
Mr. Schroth, if you would, that is actually on agenda item number 5. So if we could talk about that one separately, because it is a big issue.
I'll zip it and we'll continue.
Fair enough. Ms. Lowry, number 3 is just an FYI. Tonight, the board is voting on the PD equity grants. We talked about this at academic meeting and as well as another committee meeting. We're just simply memorializing it this evening. The max is $10,000. Our grant is submitted. With that money, we're requesting 30 to 35 Chromebooks. So again, we have talked about this, I think, in great deal. We're just now acting upon it this evening if the board is okay with that, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Number 4, when we did our audit, the one thing that was brought to attention that Dr. Minnick can speak about is the requirement by school code to include our bullying policy verbatim in our handbook. And that's what all this update really does. With that, I'll turn over to Dr. Minnick. He'll talk about the process he undertook and then the longer vision about how we're going to do a more thorough review over the next several months. Dr. Minnick?
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everybody. Essentially, the adding the policy to the handbook was very simple. It's just a matter of referring to the policy and making sure that the definition for bullying was consistent with the way it's defined and including cyberbullying in the definition. We created a section in the handbook that has the policy listed. I believe in the handbook, it begins on page 39. This spring, we will continue our annual process of getting a wider review of the policy, including representatives from each building. And it could be teachers, principals from each building, but at least an administrator from each level and representatives from each building to help us review the handbook as it stands. From there, we will take steps to begin making recommendations for revisions to the handbook. And as you know, or many of you know who've served on the board for years, a presentation would be forthcoming in the summer when we seek your approval for any recommended revisions to the way the handbook is written. And that would be up to and including any other policies that we are either directed to or feel that need to be listed in this handbook. And from there, once it's approved, we take it back, make those revisions, and publish it.
Thanks, Dr. Minnick. Ms. Lauer, so you and the community are aware. You're asking, like, why are you asking us to approve this evening? This is one thing that we, after our audit, we are found to have a verbal comment, not a finding, but a verbal comment saying, look, this should be included in the handbook. So I think there's a sense of urgency that I'd like us to address tonight. And Dr. Minnick's right. Him and his team will review it long-term over summer, and we'll reapprove it for next school year. But now that we know this is something we have to correct, I'd rather correct it immediately. So it's on the agenda tonight for your approval, ma'am.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. Next we have up is grading procedures as is related to the continuity of education plan. Rob and I and the rest of the team, everyone worked really hard on this. And I got to tell you, this is one where we're saying we have to choose compassion over compliance. This is one where we spent a lot of time really debating, discussing the pros and cons of this. And I think at this point, if equity is really at the heart of everything we're doing, to say that we're going to put weighted grades at this current time, I think would be probably the most inequitable thing we can do for our kids. And I only say that to kind of start the conversation because I wanted you to know our mindset going into this. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Heinrich.
Thank you, sir. What we are recommending is that no grades be given for Q4. We would end this year's summative assessment, that is grades, at the end of Q3, which we have set as April 21st. We've given them, our students 3 more weeks to get any outstanding assignments in before we finally put grades to rest, and we've instructed teachers to reach out to families and students to make sure that they have every opportunity to do so. At the end of that marking period, the final grade, final GPA, class valedictorian, salutatorian, etc., will be decided essentially. Now, this is because assigning grades for work in the current situation is, as Mr. Vukovic said, simply inequitable. It's impossible to fairly compare one student's work to another who might be in completely different circumstances. Academic integrity is also almost impossible for us to ensure, given the situation as is. Summative grades at this point for Q4 would be more of an assessment of the support a child has at home than a real measure of his or her ability or achievement in any particular subject. So there was actually a recent article published in an educational magazine urging the nation to not grade children in this circumstance because of these situations, because of the equity issue. So what we are recommending is that no grades will be assigned. However, the absence of grades being assigned does not mean no learning should happen. We're recommending we return to the roots of education, where we take a very intrinsic approach to this. We want to do what's best for our children and our community, and that is to teach them and grow them toward the goal of mastery of the standard. So we are encouraging our teachers to move forward. We're encouraging our students to stay engaged, and we're encouraging our families to keep their kids at the table, so to speak. And then all of the grades and assessments there will still be assessments given. Quizzes, tests, assignments, all of those things that measure a student's progress and growth will still be given, but the application of that assessment is really where we're varying. This is where we're saying the application is simply a formative one, which means we're going to use this information to steer conversations with students and families and inform our decisions about these students moving forward. rather than assigning some percentage to their work. Any questions or comments or concerns about that? I'm sure you have several.
Rob, this is Walter. I followed your timeline there as far as the end of the third grading period for items that hadn't, assignments that hadn't been completed. Are there any students missing tests? They were sick the last week. We were actually in the seats and that sort of thing. And how are you handling any situations where it isn't just a strict assignment?
Yes, sir. What the teachers have been assigned or instructed to do is any work that can be turned in fairly and equitably should be turned in. Anything that cannot, like that, in that situation where there was a test on the 13th, I was sick, I didn't get to take the test, would really be unfair for that test to be part of my grade. They have been instructed to give them what is an E grade, an excused or exempt grade for that. So that assignment will not help the student. It will not hurt the student. It will just be like the student that assignment was never given to that student. So unfortunately, for kids that are trying to up their grade and increase their achievement, they might not have the opportunity, but it also won't hurt a kid who is in an unfortunate circumstance. And that's really what was motivating our decision here. Is when we sat down initially and we started to plan this distance learning thing, it was one of the first things we addressed was we set some principles for our decision making. And number one was no child will be penalized for their circumstances. That was the number one guiding principle of our work. And the whole team agreed on that. And every decision we made was through that lens. We also look at the lens of equity, with every decision we make. And we made sure that we're going to work with parents to make sure that every child had the same opportunity when it came to these grades. So if there is somebody with outstanding assignment, the teachers and guidance counselors and principals have been instructed to reach out to that family and do everything possible to get that assignment turned in by the 21st if possible. If not, they get an excused or an exempt grade.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Yes, sir. Anyone else? Questions, concerns?
This is Terry. I have one question, Rob and Mike. Do you think there's any need for like a quality control step to make sure that these directions are being implemented by all of the teachers exactly how we want it to be done? Because I could see that there's a lot of times there's interpretation of what direction is. So I'm just wondering if there'd be a need for a quality control check. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, Mr. Kerr, I personally visited each school, visited in quote virtually, visited each school's staff meeting when we made the decision and we were launching the program, and I did set this out as an expectation for grading at that point until we heard from you guys officially. And from to see at that point, there was a rumor going around that the state might mandate something. So all teachers have been given the directive from the same source. The other thing is the principals have been instructed to have weekly staff meetings or grade level meetings to reinforce those things. And what we can do, sir, is as the 21st approaches, we can send out another document to make sure that, it is very, very clear what is expected to make sure that no child is penalized for their circumstances.
Mr. Kerr, Mr. Heinrich said exactly what I was going to say. The chance that this was already communicated to staff saying, look, this is what we're going towards pending approval. And now that if we have approval, we'd have this addressed at the staff meetings this week, sir.
Right. But I think my question still hasn't been answered completely in the fact that, again, two different people may hear that direction differently at each of the staff meetings.
So if you're saying, do you want our principals to go in and look at power grade, make sure no grades are being entered? We can definitely do that. Is that what you mean by a safety net or protocol?
Well, or some way of verifying that the grades were all calculated exactly the same across all of the teachers. What I don't want is one neighbor to be talking to another neighbor and, this teacher graded this way, and just because of hearing things differently.
No,
Yes,
fair
sir.
enough. And Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, in Power School, when we run the report cards and the class rank, we can set the parameters in which that runs under and ensure that nothing from the fourth 9 weeks is incorporated or taken into consideration, correct?
That's correct. Our school settings are controlled by the district level by Mr. Matthews. So he has already started to work on that and make sure that the quarter 4 will be eliminated from the grade. And as far as to make sure that every building does their, make sure that every teacher gets the same message, to Mr. Kerr's point about, quality control, we can absolutely do that. I can write up a procedure for each teacher to follow, put it in writing, and then have the building principals deliver that message to the teachers in the next week when the grades are coming due. So as a checklist for final grades.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. One more thing I want to point out. No grades quarter 4. There's going to be some students that are in different situations where they're going to feel like they're missing out on an opportunity to improve their standing. And for some, that is unfortunately true. If your student is like 1 point away from an A, will they have a chance to get their grade up to that A with the quarter 4? No. Their grading period would end quarter 3 because it's the only fair and equitable thing we can do. However, for students who are failing a subject and are close to that threshold for passing, teachers have been instructed again as well to make sure that they use that as a motivation for the child to stay at the table and stay engaged throughout quarter 4, and kind of dangle that carrot in front of them that says, look, if you work hard through quarter 4, and I believe that you would have passed with quarter 4, I will assign what's called an administrative 1 grade, which says that the child maybe didn't have the percentage to pass, but passed on merit of their work ethic and their effort. And it's a right that teachers have in our system that will allow them to kind of override a failing grade, so that, again, a child who needs that fourth quarter to pass will have that opportunity, and it won't affect grade point average rank or anything like that for any other comparison of scores.
I have a
Mr. Lau?
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes.
Yep, go ahead.
Yes,
Cindy.
ma'am.
I hear from fellow or past colleagues at IUP that up to 30% of their students have just disappeared. They're not answering emails. They're not answering phone calls. They're not checking into the links for web assignments. They've just disappeared. Do you have a feeling if we have any students that have basically disappeared? And if so, if they are students who were failing the first, very close to failing the first 3 quarters, but they would have a chance of not failing the class, what kind of effort are we making to reach out to them if we do have students who've disappeared?
Yes, ma'am. Each building is going through a protocol that we established to engage disengaged children. And I will say that there's nowhere near 30%. It's a very small percentage of our students, but there are a few who have just disappeared. And we are making every effort to reach out to them. The teacher is reaching out, the guidance counselor is reaching out, the principal is reaching out, and then we're sending a registered letter to the house to try to get them re-engaged. And after that, if we don't hear back from that, we're turning it over to children and youth, because it is a safety issue, because we have a responsibility to account for all of our children. And if we cannot account for them, that is a children and youth issue. So we'll be making some referrals to children and youth for some of those kids. And then our big message to all of our teachers and principals and guidance counselors was connect with the families, make sure they understand the purpose of all this and the benefit of all this. So they should be making multiple contacts per week with all the kids they can reach, and the ones that they can't reach, they are going to turn that over to children and youth to have a home visit done.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for you, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Have a parent that has 3 kids in the high school, junior high school, and of all the teachers that those kids have, there's only been 3 contacts to those 3 kids. And there should be I don't know, each kid has 5 teachers. It should be how do you know? How do you confirm that the teachers are actually making these contacts and doing the work and not sitting in a coffee shop filling out the forms?
We have shared a contact log with all staff. All staff must fill out the log whenever they make contact with a family or a child. Now, it does not count for when they have open classes. Like if they have a class in a meeting like we're having now, they don't have to fill out the log. That's automatically recorded, and they're supposed to save that recording as evidence. But there's also a form that they should fill out every time that they make a phone call or try to connect with a parent or connect with a parent. And last time I looked, we were well over 3,000 contacts.
And I don't dispute that somebody's filling out the paperwork. My question is, how do you know
How we confirm that actually happened?
that it actually happened? And do you do any back checking with the parents or the students themselves? And I just point this out that this is, out of what are these kids taking? 5, 6 classes each? 18 classes? That
It should be much more than 3 contacts for sure by now.
Yeah,
You're right.
and when I say 3 contacts, there were 3 teachers out of the possible number of teachers that were making contacts. The other ones were not. There was not homework. One of the boys was doing his homework in 5 minutes when we were running classes. The other one the older one had more work to do. But my concern is that everybody's nodding their head and pretending to do the work. And I don't believe that's true. But when I say that, there has to be some kind of back check to make sure that the people who say they're filling out, just because you fill out the form doesn't mean you made the contact.
Yes, sir.
But Tom, I think the contact is if the student's not participating. If the student's participating, then there wouldn't be an additional contact. There would just be class the way it's been set up by that teacher for that class period.
And my concern, Uta, is that the teacher's actually not doing that work.
Right.
Then I would say that maybe that's something that needs to be handled by the administrative staff at that location.
Yeah, I think Ms. Lauer is 100% right. I would just simply say, give me the name of the parent, and I'll make sure they get a phone call by this evening.
Yeah, that too. And then there's another thing, Mr. Vukovic and Ms. Lowry, we are sending out a parent survey, definitely by the end of this week, to try to assess how much work is being given. Is it too much? Is it too little? Are you hearing from your teachers? And what we could do is we could modify our one question to be something that is quantifiable, where it keeps their email or puts the child's name listed there. And then we could say on, how many contacts from your teacher have you had, and then put a list there. That would be a good way to check and inspect reality. And then we could follow up with those teachers of the child if those numbers are too low.
That makes sense, Rob.
And Mr. McElhaney, Dr. Minnick, I know you're on the line. Follow up with Mr. Harley via email. We need to reach out to this parent, support her. So let's find out what we need to do to help her. And it's not to place blame, it's to get the help they need. So we can definitely follow up with that, sir, as well.
Rob, I just want to make a comment about, the survey of the students. I think we need to remember that, a third of what we hear from our students, like there's 3 sides to this, right? There's what you're hearing from the teacher, there's what you're hearing from the student or the family, and then there's what's really going on. And so none of it is 100% because, the student could just be like, no, I didn't hear from the teacher. Well, you did, but you did that work alongside the work that you were supposed to do for the day before. So,
right.
Maybe it's just some confusion. I just think that, everybody's dealing with the current crisis and doing the best that they can. And hopefully that's really what's going on. And at least when we find out that somebody needs some additional support, we can provide that.
Agreed.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just suggesting we trust and verify.
Yes, sir.
I'd also like to say that I found like 6 different emails from different teachers today in my long list of emails on my regular email. And some of them had gone to the junk mail. Some of them had just slipped by me. So that also could be a big possibility, depending on how much they
I
get.
think Ms. Blank's right. I think this is a work in progress. We never said we're going to be perfect if we're making mistakes. I appreciate everyone bringing it to our attention. We can call, follow up, and continue to get better. That's what our goal is right now.
Rob, this is Walter. I had a follow-up question to your referring to children and youth.
Yes, sir.
If these students have dropped off the grid, as it were, does this also set them up for possibly, where they're not responding at all, truancy issues? How does the truancy laws apply in this case? And in addition to children and youth, at what point in your plan do you pull the trigger and turn them in for truancy enforcement?
Yes, sir. It would, and we are currently working on a plan for our attendance moving forward as we move our plan from enrichment and review more to a planned instruction model. We need to address that attendance issue. So you're absolutely right. There would be a connection, and it would be a very similar referral. Just like we would refer a truant child to CYS, we would refer this missing family to CYS. And it's really for the child's protection. Mr. Zahorchak actually came up with the protocol and put it in place, but it was something that we learned in Johnstown because a lot of those kids would disappear. And, there were things that we were worried about, like with child trafficking and stuff like that, which is where, out of that necessity came this idea. So we absolutely would do everything we can to follow up with every agency that can help us, whether it's the truancy route or just a regular referral, but we'll find the kids for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lowry, if it's okay with you and there's no further comments or questions, I'd move on to the last 3 agenda items, which is number 6, 7, and 8 on our agenda, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
This one, I promised the board an hour exec session, so I'll go over them briefly. And for the sake of brevity, the nice thing is you could take these, look at them, and the second reading will not be till next month. So if you so choose to vote tonight on first reading, they're not official until the second reading, so we have some time. But there's 3 of them on there for your review. One is about attendance at meetings via electronic communications. Our current policy we suspended based on the pandemic. This is an optional policy that we can use as a result of the pandemic to reflect the potential impact of different circumstances or timing, such as health and safety emergencies, that will allow us to continue to have meetings in this manner. Again, it's optional. I recommend it because it doesn't mean we have to do it. There is an expectation that we'll use it in extreme emergency situations, but then this would preclude us from having to suspend the policy in the future. So that's for your review this evening for first reading. Again, it won't become official till second, but let me go over the next 2, and then I'll answer any questions that may be there as well. Policy number 204. This is the first reading on attendance for students. We're in the process of updating this to reflect some of our changes. Again, if you want to hold this, that's absolutely fine, as it's not timely. We need this for next year, but it is aligned with what the state's expectations regarding comp ed or the proper school age for kids, where it went from, I believe, 8 to 17 to now 6 and 18 years old. You can look at that. Again, I think since we're rushed this evening, I would hold off on policy 204. I can always add that to the future. But the last one I do want to spend some time talking about and then address any questions is evaluation of employees. The PDE issued some guidance on this, and I looked at our policy, and our policy is pretty clear. The superintendent or designee shall develop plans for evaluation of district employees to be submitted to the board for approval. In this particular case, PD is pretty clear. Our effective elective data, SLOs, Future Ready Index, SPP, those are now based on hold, and evaluation is based on classroom observation as well as practice. And I know the board's aware of this as well as our administrators, but I want to clarify. When the teachers get rated, it's not just based on a classroom observation. It's based on their totality of the year. So when they are issued a rating, that rating reflects the whole entire year, which includes an observation, but the other part as well, their practice. So what I did this evening, I have a presentation on there for your review, and then I did a narrated one that we'd send out to staff that really just explains that to staff, that it's aligned to PD's requirements. It does base 100% of it on classroom observation and practice. And I also spelled it out for our non-teaching professionals, which in this case would be guidance counselors, nurses, and school psychs, and as well as for our principals. I think it's kind of a moot point. I don't know if it really needs, it's a technicality, if it needs approved, but I like to be, I know that board values transparency, and I want to send this out to staff, so I wanted to make the committee aware of it tonight. So again, with the last 3 items, I would ask us to take action if the board is willing to, and the committee recommends it, on the revision of attendance at meetings via electronic communications. I would hold on the attendance policy because I don't think we have enough time to get into that. And then I would also ask for support on evaluation of employees. And at this time, Ms. Lowry, I'll take any questions, and the team will as well.
So just to clarify, this evaluation of employees is from here on out or just during this time period?
Just for the remainder of the year, for this year, 2019-20.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, the only thing I'll do at this point, Ms. Lowry, is maybe, I know we're running short on time, is to ask the committee to review the non-agenda items, and we can address them at subsequent and future meetings. For example, the IUP agreements, the MTSS facilitators, and those staffing positions, we can address at audit and finance, or we could just say them to your next meeting next month. But for the sake of time, I would like to hold those because that way we can have almost close to an hour for our exec session. If there's no other questions, that's all I have, Ms. Lowry.
I think that sounds like a good plan.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and I'll see the board and Mr. Heinrich and Mr. Zohorchak in exec session.
All right.
Thank you.